So yes, cost-nothing approach to school climate. So it's a time when everybody wants a little bit more money for this program, that program. In schools in particular, they're always thinking, we need more money, we need more money. And I say, we don't necessarily need more money, we need people to think differently. So what I'm going to give you today is a little bit of a presentation on how to build a positive school climate. And whether you work in a school or you don't work in a school, wherever you work, what I hope to give you today is something that you can use in your organization. Let's talk about culture change. There is a culture change today with kids. So when I went to school and you went to school, kids might have been valued for clubs they were part of, sports teams that they were part of, or things of that nature. There's a different way that kids are thinking right now. They think that the more they disrespect someone, the more respect they get. Do you understand what I mean by that? So kids are saying sometimes if I, diss somebody, if I stab somebody, if I shoot somebody, if I'm disrespecting them, I'm building my value more. And sometimes we think that this only happens in areas where there's social housing. But what I can tell you is it happens in all areas. Part of it comes from the culture change of what we see on the media. We see lots of different things where people think that if you do things like that, you build yourself up. And we have to be aware of those things when we're working with kids. So there's a change in the way that kids think and the way they think they're going to be valued. And what I say to you is that our challenge is, regardless of what institution they're in, whether they're in a school, whether they're in a detention center, wherever they are, our job as adults is to find value in kids. We have to make sure that they feel valued for what they're doing. So I believe every student has some kind of talent. It's our responsibility to find out what that talent is. I wrote down the word on here as well, the whole idea of bullying. So bullying comes up all the time as being a child problem. So I would ask you to think about this. I would ask you to think about the way the world works. Who are the countries that have the most power? Usually the countries that have the atomic bomb. Who are the people in government level that are arguing at tables and disrespecting each other? Some people might even say that Donald Trump is a bully. I'm not going to say that because I'm not going to talk politics, but what I'm going to say to you is that we need to stop blaming the kids and saying that bullying is a kid problem when it's really a societal issue. It's not just a kid problem. It's when we label it as bullying and we tell kids that they're bullies, they get more into that value system that I was just talking about in terms of how they feel valued. So we have to pay attention to those things and pay attention to the culture that's out there. Bullying is a societal problem. It's not just a kid problem. The key, as I said, is that everybody wants to be valued. So here's something I talk a lot to principals about or anybody in an organization. I can tell from all of you, you're all smart people. You all know what you're doing in your jobs. And we often in these positions, when we make decisions, get called administrators. And I would say to you this, is that we have a lot of administrators in the companies, the businesses, the areas that we work, but what we're looking for are leaders. Leaders are only created when people follow. Administrators know policies and procedures real well, really well. But if you only use your administration skills to lead anybody, you're not going to get anywhere, because not everything can be put in black and white. You have to be a leader. And if we want to make a difference for kids, we have to be leaders. What I'll tell you about leaders is that when they run organizations, whether it be a school or whatever, they thrive. But when your organization is only about being an administrator, you're just surviving. I have the opportunity to go to schools all the time. I work in all of the Scarborough area. There's about 100 schools that I'm responsible for. And I can tell those people in the schools that run the schools whether they are a leader or they are an administrator. You got to be a leader. Every school, every organization needs to have some kind of vision. It needs to be some kind of vision that is attached to it. It needs to be able to get to you emotionally. It has to be equitable. It has to be strategic. It has to be concrete. It has to be shared jointly by every stakeholder in your organization, whether it's a school or wherever you work. It has to be tied to academics in the school system, maybe tied to something else in your system, and it has to be personal. There has to be a personal commitment by every individual in that organization. Those kind of things are really important in terms of creating a positive school climate or any climate, but also changing culture. Do you believe? I put this in there as a simple little phrase that I often talk about. So many of you might have heard of Chris Husbands. Chris Husbands was the guy who did the latest Eaton Center shooting. Chris Husbands, before that, about maybe 5 months before that, was in my office. He came to me. He was a student that was a former student of mine, but came back as an adult student at school. And he said, Mr. Crossdale, he goes, I'm having some problems with my girlfriend. I just want to get a little bit of advice. Can we talk about it a little bit? I'm trying to turn my life around. And then 5-6 months later, the Eaton Center shooting happens. Now, most people would look at that person and say, you know, he's a horrible person, he's terrible, he did this, it was disgusting. And what happened was disgusting. But what you don't know is the backstories behind some of these people that do these things that are outrageous. Did I believe in Chris? I totally believed in Chris. When he came to my office and was adamant about changing his life and trying to make changes, he definitely wanted to make changes. Did he make a mistake? Yes, he made a mistake. But what I'm telling you is this. If we have more people that actually believe in students, regardless of what they've done in the past, regardless of what they've come to the table with, regardless of what the person beside you is telling you about that person, if we can believe in that student or whoever that person's in front of you, and it might not even be a student of yours, it might be a nephew, a niece, somebody. Most kids just want somebody to believe in them, and it starts with that. You've got to start believing, first of all. And to be able to do that, you have to know yourself. You can't tell me that there's nobody in this room that has some kind of bias. We all have bias, but yet we don't want to address it. If I was to ask you what a criminal would look like, you might be able to describe that based on your bias. And what I say to you, and I tell this to the people in the school system as well too, is that we can't afford to be biased. We can't afford to judge people. We have to be able to take people for who they are, get to know them. It's not about the bias that you have, it's about releasing that bias, opening up that mind to whoever you're around. Public education, and this would be public for anybody. People are sometimes quite, they're quite surprised when they get, for instance, in a school, we get kids that are coming in, kids that are being violent, kids that are sexually assaulting, all these different kinds of things that are happening, and we are surprised. And I say school is just a small sample of what life is. So in a school, it just replicates what happens in real life. Are there going to be sexual offenders out there? Yes. Are there going to be kids that make mistakes? Yes. Are there going to be kids that do crime? Yes. Are there going to be kids that are A students? Yes. There's no difference in society. What I'm saying as public servants, let's stop being surprised about kids because we have to expect that certain kids are going to do certain things. We don't know the background. We don't know why they're doing it. But let's get past the surprise part of it and start working with kids. Stop taking things personally. I'll tell you this one story, and this is another one about when we get into that profession of working with kids, is that we can't take things personal. So I had a grade 4 student who was in a behavior class, had all these different disabilities, and he was constantly violent, out of control, and I remember his teacher who worked really, really hard. She wasn't one of those people who said, I want him out of my classroom. She said, I want to work with this kid, I want to work with him, I'm going to work with him. And she did that, but sometimes it got to be too much. And she couldn't handle like restraining him and doing all those types of things. And I said to her, that's okay, I'll take over. So I'm in my suit, and every day I dress in a suit as a principal. And, I had to start restraining this kid. And, as I'm holding him, these little kids, you're holding them, they're trying to bite you and kick you and everything. And you're just trying to hold them. And, I'm not saying too much. And because I think less talk is better at those times. And I'm sweating, sweat's coming down my head. And my secretary comes over and wipes my head off in the sweat. And I'm like, thank you, just like it's normal. And this little grade 4 kid, he looks at me, he looks at in my room on the shelf, and there's pictures of my 3 daughters, and he says to me, you wait till I get older, I'm going to rape and kill your daughters, I'm going to rape and kill your daughters. And I thought, nothing of it. Nothing of it. He's just a kid doing the best he can with what he has at that moment. Did I take it personally? No. So we have to understand as public servants, we shouldn't be taking things personal. Kids are going to do things all the time. It doesn't mean that we accept it, but there's a time and place to teach kids about what's wrong. We got to be brave enough to start conversations that matter. So if you're in a system, whether you're working in probation, you're a police officer, whether you're a teacher, whether you're an ed assistant or whatever you are, we have to stop bottling things up and start having real conversations. Glenn Singleton talked about, he's a guy that wrote this book called Courageous Conversations. His courageous conversations were more about talking about things between black people and white people. And I'm saying courageous conversations are about anything that you're ready to talk about. Something that you might not want to talk to your boss about, but you need to. If we don't start to have conversations, then we're not going to get to the essence of what we want to get to. So all of these things that I'm talking to you about is about creating climate, positive school climate. Get these things out of the way. Start working towards these things. We can't bottle things up and expect them to be better. We have to be fearless in everything that we do. We can't be afraid of the people we work with. In schools today, we have people that are afraid of the kids, afraid of kindergarten kids, grade 1 kids, grade 2 kids, grade 3 kids, all kids. As a matter of fact, I would say that kindergarten to grade 3 kids nowadays are holding schools hostage with the amount of behavior that's going on. And people are afraid of the kids. We can't be afraid of the clients that we work with. That is our job. We have to be able to work with all kids. We also have to be able to not be afraid of the places that we work in. When I worked in a detention center, we had staff that were afraid to work there, yet they accepted a job. How is that fair to kids? If you're going to be afraid of the place that you're working, if you're in a school, if you're in any organization, how can you be afraid of that? And we have to be fearless in terms of we cannot be afraid to do things differently. There was a student in my school, his name was Jordan. I came into the school as a principal in January. School year starts in September. From September to January, there was 9 principals that came through that school. Our school was known as the #2 school on the LOI, Learning Opportunities Index, which means we're the #2, I guess you could say, most difficult school in the Toronto District School Board. And so many principals came through, and weren't able to do what needed to be done. So my first day there in January, there's always that one kid in the class or in the school that everybody talks about, he's the troublemaker. And sure enough, that student came into my office, maybe the second day. His name is Jordan. And Jordan, I sat him down in my office, and I said to Jordan, Jordan, what's going on? He said, well, I did this, this, and this. I said, okay, well, as a result of that, there's going to be a consequence. He said, yeah, okay, that's fine. I said, Jordan, when you get older, what do you want to be? Jordan said, maybe I'd like to be a principal like you. So I thought to myself, okay, if that's what you really want to be, what I'm going to say to you is that you are going to go, because he had some special needs and different things, he went to multiple classes, some support in spec ed and different things. I said, you're going to give me 1 month of great behavior, 1 month of it. And every teacher you see has to sign off on that every single day to say that you've been doing a great job. Sure enough, Jordan did that. For a whole month straight, no problems, no issues, no nothing. He comes to me, and he knocks on the door. Well, actually, I never had my door closed. It was always open. He says, Mr. Crossdale, can I see you? I said, yes. He goes, here's my book. I open it up. He said, all of my teachers have said I've done a good job. I said, that's amazing. I said, now you get to be principal of the day tomorrow. And so for me, every day as a principal, I had a little workout room that I created there for kids. So I was at school every morning at 6:30 with the boys and the girls, teaching them how to train, teaching them how to lift properly, but more than that, teaching them how to get along with each other, getting them to do something positive. I said, you are going to show up at school 6:30 in the morning when I'm here. You're going to help the kids train. You're going to help them get along and do all the things that I would do. And in addition to that, for the day, you have to wear a suit as well, too, because I wear a suit every day. Sure enough, 6:30 in the morning, Jordan showed up. Sure enough, Jordan ran that exercise club. Not only did Jordan do that, he did the announcements. Because every day I make sure that I'm on the announcements saying positive things to an environment or a clientele where most people don't believe in. My announcements made a big difference because I was positive every day. And I said to Jordan, you're going to write your announcements down as well, too. And not only that, you're going to be doing the assembly that we have today, because we have a school assembly. You're going to be going on recess duty, and you're going to be doing the walk around through the classes every day, just like I would do. And I can tell you this, Jordan did a phenomenal day, did a phenomenal thing the whole day long. He was fantastic. But it wasn't about Jordan. This story is not about Jordan. This is what changed the way that the staff thought about Jordan. I always knew Jordan could do this. But what it did for Jordan was change the way that the staff thought about him. It gave him an opportunity to be successful. And I'm saying when we need to do things differently, we need to think about things that are different so that kids can be successful. And it doesn't mean following status quo in schools. It means that you got to do things differently. Ego, I talk about this all the time with people as well, too. Perhaps one of the biggest things that prevent us from being able to be successful. We think because we get a position as a principal, as the chief of police, of whatever it is, we sometimes think, I am the principal, you need to listen to me. I am the chief, you need to listen to me. And I say that's bullshit. Excuse my language. We have to be able to earn that. You can't think because you're in a position of power or me standing up on stage that I have any power over you. You have to be able to build those relationships so that kids respect you. We have to leave the ego at the door. When I go into these schools, like I say, about 100 schools I have to work with, one of the things I notice is when the climate in the school is horrible. And part of the reason is because the principal is just saying, you must do this, do this, do this, do this. And are not even visible, they're not out there with the people, they're not out there with their staff, they're not out there with the kids. You have to be able to leave the ego at the door. Your visibility is important. That's the one thing that probably makes you accessible to everybody. Whether you're the boss, you're the principal, whoever you are, you have to be accessible to people. And you're more accessible when you're out there and visible. I walk through those classes every single day. Didn't matter if I was at a meeting in the morning, even if I'm in that class for 10 seconds. You make sure that you're visible. You have to be able to greet students. You got to be able to get involved. You need to be visible. Communication is so important. How we communicate with people. Actively listen. I want you to try this with someone that you go home to tonight or even today at the conference and get into a conversation with somebody and see if they interrupt you before you finish. We have a hard time as human beings, of actively listening. And sometimes before kids can even get anything out of their mouth, we're already saying, why'd you do that for? Listen. Actively listen to what people are saying. Actively listen to the kids. Watch your tone and body language. Think before you speak. And make sure your words don't offend. And I make this comment here when people say this, and they often say, lots of us say that in the room. I take issue to that. As soon as you say that, you put somebody on the defensive. There's better ways of saying that. There's ways to say things like, that's an interesting point. Have you ever considered this? So be careful about your communication. Emotional intelligence. And I took the principal's course. I've taken the superintendent's course. And I'll tell you this. And I shake my head. It's like everybody in those courses think they're emotionally intelligent. And then when you hang around with them a little bit and they start speaking, you say, hell no. You're not emotionally intelligent. But everybody thinks they are. And this is what I say. We don't have to all be emotionally intelligent. What we have to be able to do is to be able to look at this and say, okay, you know what? I've got some good self-awareness. I've got some good social skills. But my self-regulation is horrible. But I do think when we're working with people, more than your IQ is your EQ, is being able to know yourself and where you lack in the emotional intelligence. Or if you have the emotional intelligence, you should be thinking to yourself, you would probably be a very good leader. Emotional intelligence is really, really important. Value. So I don't care if this is your staff or this is the students. If you are a true leader in any organization, you have to be able to find ways to value the people you work with. So one of the things that I push to my staff is I valued them like you wouldn't believe. It didn't mean that I blew smoke up their butts if they weren't any good, but I would find something to value them about. If they were doing things that I thought were bad for kids, I would pressure and support them out of that school. But I start off by valuing people. You've got to find things to value in the people that you work with. Same thing with the kids. They want to be valued. Am I way past? Wow. Power of positivity. I won't go through all of this. What I'll tell you is this from that slide, and hopefully you can read it, is that when I walk into a school, and the thing that stands out to me the most in this slide, and I think it's in this one, is that you must find a way to smile. And I say that very, very like when I walk into a school and I see people with faces that are nothing but like mean faces, sad, mad, and I don't see them smile. Like when I can walk into a school and I walk through there and I see people smiling, right automatically I know the school climate is great. But when you go to a school and you have people that have these jobs that they were dying to have, where they get to impact students, and they can't smile, we got a problem. We got a problem. Power of positivity. We have to be the most positive people when working with youth. We have to find ways to be positive. I'm going to kind of end with this slide. How many of you have heard of the 180-day factor? Nobody, because I invented it. The 180-day factor is this. For about 180 days a year, 180 days in the year, 6 hours a day, kids are in school. 180 days. That's a lot of days, sometimes more than they'll spend with their own parents. And what I say is this to you, is that, and this is probably the most powerful thing any of you sitting down will ever have, is your words and your actions. Your words and your actions. Your words as a person in charge of a student can disengage or engage them from something they're passionate about for the rest of their life by the power of your words. And we need to remember that. Your actions also makes a difference on how people feel. If I'm as the principal and I'm walking by and I say hi to one kid and I don't say hi to another kid, that can make that student feel like they're left out. Our words and our actions are the most powerful things we have as people working with kids, probably people working with your own children, and even the people that you're with. So don't forget the 180-day factor because it impacts, huge impact on how people think or how students think of themselves. You know, I had a student that was a budding writer. She went in to go see the librarian, showed the librarian what she was writing. He said, "This is garbage." She came into my office. She started crying. She said, "You know, I've always wanted to be a writer. I don't want to be a writer anymore." And I don't think the teacher meant it in a bad way. I think he had a relationship, he thought, with her where she wouldn't take it as that. But that point right there could have stopped her from being a writer, just by words and by actions. Lastly, in all of this that I'm trying to say to you is that, and especially with the 180-day factor, is that there is a moral purpose in what we do when we're working with youth. They are the future. They are the ones that will make the difference and do better than we do. So don't forget that anytime you're working with youth, there is a moral purpose to what you are doing. It's not about money. It's about the relationships you build. Thank you.